The email from Elena's lawyers arrived at 11:47 p.m., threatening to sue me for stealing the algorithm I'd invented. Except the patent filing showed her company as the sole inventor, and my name appeared nowhere in the 47-page application. I'm Marcus Chen, 28 years old, data scientist, the kind of person who sees patterns in chaos and builds mathematical models that predict the future. Or at least, I used to think I was building my future. Turns out I was building someone else's empire, while she systematically erased me from my own invention. Let me take you back 18 months to where this started, because you need to understand how someone can steal your life's work in broad daylight while making you thank them for the opportunity. I was working at a struggling EV parts supplier in Austin. One of those companies always 6 months from either breakthrough or bankruptcy. My official job was analyzing battery performance data for clients. My unofficial obsession was something bigger. I'd been developing a predictive maintenance algorithm for lithium-ion batteries, a way to forecast catastrophic failure 6 months in advance with 94% accuracy. If it worked at scale, it could save EV manufacturers billions in warranty claims and prevent thousands of roadside breakdowns. I worked on it nights and weekends. My apartment in East Austin became a lab, laptop on the kitchen table, whiteboards covering every wall, coffee cups forming archaeological layers of all-nighters. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, when I finally cracked the degradation modeling using a hybrid approach nobody had tried, combining electrochemical impedance spectroscopy data with machine learning pattern recognition trained on actual failure cases. I knew I had something. I just didn't know how to turn it into something. South by Southwest that March, I'd submitted a research presentation on battery analytics, got accepted for a small technical panel, 40 people in a convention center breakout room, mostly engineers and a few investors. I presented my findings, careful not to reveal the full methodology, but enough to show the accuracy rates. After the panel, a woman approached me. Tailored charcoal blazer, confident handshake, the kind of presence that makes everyone else in the room seem less focused. Elena Voss. She said she'd spent 12 years in automotive, operations director at Tesla during the Model S scaling, then ran a hardware startup to a successful acquisition. Now she consulted for venture capital firms evaluating automotive technology deals. She told me my presentation was brilliant, but I was positioning it all wrong. Over coffee, she asked questions that cut straight to the commercial implications. Not, how does the algorithm work, but what's the total addressable market for battery failure prediction across grid storage, aviation, and defense applications? Nobody had ever asked me those questions. I'd been thinking about the science. She was thinking about the industry. Elena said something that afternoon that lodged in my brain. Marcus, you're doing Nobel Prize level work in a job that pays you $58,000 a year. That's not humility. That's malpractice against your own potential. She offered to help. No equity, no compensation, just informal advice on commercialization strategy. Said she was financially secure from her exit and liked mentoring technical founders who were too focused on building to see the business opportunity. She'd introduce me to her network, VCs, automotive executives, battery manufacturers. All I needed to do was keep developing while she helped me understand how to position it. Over the next month, she delivered. Introductions to partners at automotive-focused venture firms, conversations with CTOs at major battery manufacturers. Suddenly I was in rooms where people threw around terms like enterprise value and strategic acquirers, like they were discussing the weather. Elena was always there, steering conversations, translating my technical explanations into business language that made investors lean forward. Then she suggested I quit my job. I was hesitant. No savings beyond 3 months' rent, student loans. The algorithm was promising, but not proven at scale. Elena had a solution. She'd incorporate a company, handle all the fundraising and business operations while I perfected the technology. I'd get founders' equity once they raised a seed round. She said early equity grants had tax complications better handled after institutional money arrived. Meanwhile, she'd cover my living expenses from her consulting income. Called it a forgivable loan. She sent me a one-page consulting agreement. Standard stuff, she said. I'd provide technical advisory services, work product belonged to the company we'd form, confidentiality and non-disclosure provisions. The equity was referenced verbally, but would be formalized once the corporate structure is finalized by lawyers. I signed it at a coffee shop on a Friday afternoon. Elena ordered champagne, said we were building something that would change the automotive industry. I believed her. I should have hired a lawyer. I should have read every word 3 times. I should have demanded the equity in writing before signing anything else. But I didn't. I was 28, brilliant at mathematics, and catastrophically naive about business. Elena knew exactly what she was doing. I didn't know yet that this signature would end up being weaponized against me. 4 months disappeared in a blur of code. Elena rented a WeWork office downtown, glass walls, standing desks, that startup aesthetic that makes you feel like you're building the future. I worked 80-hour weeks refining the algorithm, expanding the training data, stress testing the models. Elena was always in motion. Investor meetings, partnership discussions, legal consultations. She'd update me in passing. Things were progressing. IP protections were being filed. The fundraising was looking strong. Then she asked me to sign inventor declarations for patent applications. Said we needed to protect the technology before taking more investor meetings. Standard procedure. I signed 4 of them. I was listed as the inventor. Elena was listed as the assignee through the company. I didn't understand the significance of that distinction. I didn't know yet that those provisional patents would later be refiled without my name, using technical legal mechanisms I'd never heard of. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday in July. A former colleague from my old job sent me a LinkedIn message. "Congrats on the new company." I had no idea what he meant. I Googled Elena's company name, something I'd embarrassingly never done. Found a TechCrunch article from 3 days earlier announcing a $3.2 million seed round led by Autotech Ventures, a Tier 1 automotive VC. The article quoted Elena extensively about the technology's potential, the market opportunity, the strategic roadmap. I appeared in exactly 1 sentence, buried in the 3rd paragraph. The company is working with former consultant Marcus Chen, who contributed early research. Former consultant. Not co-founder, not inventor, not even current team member. Former consultant who contributed early research. I felt like I'd been punched. I called Elena immediately. She was smooth, almost annoyed that I was bothering her with this. Explained the journalist had gotten the relationship wrong. Reporters always screw up these details. She was actually protecting me by keeping my name out of the primary narrative until we had proper agreements in place. Didn't want investors getting spooked by complicated cap table questions before the paperwork was finalized. She said my equity documents would be ready by the end of the week. Just needed the lawyers to finish incorporating everything correctly. They never arrived. When I pressed the following week, she said the lead investor had concerns about my previous employment agreement, potential IP contamination. Work I'd done while employed at the parts supplier might technically belong to them, and that could cloud ownership of the algorithm. They needed to clean that up before formalizing equity. Meanwhile, she was hiring an engineering team and needed me to focus on training them. Documentation, architecture diagrams, making the algorithm reproducible. Red flags were everywhere. But I had no income, mounting credit card debt, and no alternative. I kept working. I kept believing the equity was coming. I kept documenting my work and training Elena's engineers, not understanding I was systematically handing her everything she needed to replace me. If you've ever had someone take credit for your work, whether it's a project at your job, an idea you shared, or something you built, you know that specific kind of betrayal. It's not just about the work itself. It's about being erased. Drop a comment if you've experienced something similar, because these stories matter. They're how we learn to protect ourselves. 2 months later, the Series A announcement hit TechCrunch. $18 million led by Volta Capital Partners. The press release listed Elena Voss as founder and CEO. The CTO was someone named Derek Huang, a Stanford PhD I'd never heard of. Elena had hired him 3 weeks earlier but never introduced us. I wasn't mentioned in the release at all. I demanded a meeting. Elena brought Derek and their general counsel, a sharp-eyed attorney from a major firm whose retainer probably cost more than I'd made all year. They sat across from me in a glass conference room while Elena delivered what she'd obviously rehearsed. Based on forensic review of code commits, Derek had substantially improved and refactored my original work. The current algorithm was derived from but meaningfully distinct from my contribution. Moreover, my consulting agreement clearly stated all work product belonged to the company. My role had always been advisory. Elena had been transparent about that from day one. The lawyer slid a separation agreement across the table. $75,000 and a gratitude acknowledgement in future company materials. In exchange, I'd sign away all claims and agree to a 5-year non-compete in predictive battery analytics. If I didn't sign, they'd enforce the non-compete anyway. And they had emails where I'd discussed the project with battery manufacturers during the advisory period. That violated my NDA. Could be prosecuted as industrial espionage. I didn't sign. But I also had no idea what to do. I left that meeting feeling erased. Like 18 months of my life had been a magic trick where I'd voluntarily handed Elena everything valuable and received nothing but the privilege of watching her perform with it. I crashed on a friend's couch, found contract work through a coding boot camp, building databases for small businesses, the kind of work that pays rent but destroys your soul. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. thinking about the algorithm, about the breakthrough I'd made, about Elena presenting it to investors as her innovation. Then I got a message from someone named Sarah Kwan. Said she used to work business development for Elena's company. Said there were things I needed to know. Could we meet? We met at a coffee shop in Pflugerville, far enough from downtown that we wouldn't run into anyone from the Austin tech scene. Sarah was young, maybe 25, with the exhausted look of someone who'd been chewed up by a startup and spit out. She brought a folder. Said she'd archived documents before they fired her. What Sarah showed me was devastating. Internal Slack messages where Elena discussed me as the technical resource and useful for the initial proof of concept but not founder material. Email threads where she explicitly told investors I was just an academic researcher who sold us early IP rights, not a founder, not a consultant, just someone they had acquired work from. Board meeting notes discussing how to position the technology for the Series B without complications from the original developer. Most damning, an email from Elena to Derek, dated 2 weeks before they offered me the separation agreement. Subject line, documentation cleanup. The body said, before patent finalization, make sure all technical documentation is rewritten to obscure original authorship. We need clean IP provenance for due diligence. That's not ambiguous business strategy. That's deliberate fraud. Sarah also told me something else. Elena's previous successful hardware exit that she always referenced involved a similar situation. A mechanical engineer who designed the core technology claimed Elena had structured him out of the company and taken credit for his invention. That case had settled quietly under strict NDA, but Sarah had tracked down the engineer through mutual contacts. He confirmed the pattern. This is where the story shifts, because I learned something critical. When someone does this once, they've done it before, and they'll do it again. If you're watching this and you've spotted patterns like this in your own situation, a mentor who keeps delaying paperwork, a partner who controls all the accounts, someone who's always restructuring agreements, pay attention to that instinct. Subscribe to Karma's Echo if you want more stories about how these schemes unravel, because the pattern recognition might save you before you're in too deep. I took everything to an IP litigation attorney, burning my last credit card limit on the consultation. David Park, a partner at a boutique firm specializing in technology disputes. He reviewed everything methodically. 2 hours later, he delivered the prognosis. Legally, I was in a weak position. The consulting agreement, while predatory, was enforceable. The patent situation was murky. I was on the provisional applications, but not the final utility patents, and proving inventorship after the fact is expensive and uncertain. A traditional litigation approach would cost $200,000 minimum, with no guarantee of success. But David noticed something in Sarah's documents. The Series A term sheet included standard representations and warranties. The company represents it owns all IP free and clear with no disputed claims. If I could establish I was a legitimate co-inventor and that the company knowingly excluded me to fraudulently misrepresent IP ownership to investors, that wasn't just a contract dispute. That was securities fraud. More importantly, the board notes mentioned an upcoming Series B. Elena was targeting $60 million at a $300 million valuation. She'd been pitching enterprise contracts with Ford and General Motors that depended entirely on the algorithm's accuracy and provenance. David's strategy was elegant. We wouldn't sue Elena. We'd go to her investors with evidence of IP contamination. Give them a chance to investigate before the Series B closed. The leverage wasn't litigation damages. It was threatening the valuation and their reputation as a diligence-competent firm. I spent 3 weeks building an airtight case, recovered old GitHub repositories from my personal account showing algorithm development timestamped before I ever met Elena, found emails to battery researchers from 14 months earlier explaining the methodology in detail, located the original Jupyter notebooks with my development notes, complete with creation dates. Built a forensic technical comparison showing the current company algorithm was mathematically identical to my original work, just refactored with different variable names. Then, the smoking gun. In Sarah's archive, that internal email where Elena explicitly told Derek to rewrite documentation to obscure original authorship. I didn't go to Elena. I went to Volta Capital Partners, the lead Series A investor. Sent a detailed letter to the managing partner who'd led the deal. Subject line, Material IP misrepresentation in company investment. The letter was surgical. Professional tone, no threats, just evidence. Code provenance with timestamps. Email chains proving invention timeline. Patent comparison. Internal communications showing knowing fraud. I included my contact information and noted the firm might want to conduct independent verification before proceeding with Series B diligence. 48 hours later, David got a call from Volta's general counsel. They wanted to meet immediately. The meeting happened in Volta's downtown office. Glass and steel and Texas Hill Country views. David and I sat on one side of a conference table. Volta's general counsel, their portfolio operations director, and the managing partner who'd led the deal sat across from us. They'd already done preliminary verification, pulled the GitHub timestamps, confirmed the emails with battery researchers, reviewed the patents, cross-referenced dates. They were furious. They'd invested $12 million based on what now appeared to be fraudulent IP representations. The The managing partner asked me directly, "What do you want?" This was the moment. I could have asked for money, could have demanded they pull their investment and tank the company, could have pushed for maximum damage. Instead, I deployed the strategy David and I had planned. 3 demands. First, Volta immediately requires Elena to assign proper IP ownership reflecting me as co-inventor and original algorithm developer. If she refuses, they exercise their rights under the investment agreement to investigate and potentially rescind their funding. Second, I receive meaningful equity, not founders' shares, that ship had sailed, but significant Series A shares, from Elena's personal allocation, not the company pool. Enough that when the company succeeds, I share in the value I created. Third, Elena must publicly acknowledge my contribution in all future materials, Series B deck, press releases, company website. My name appears as co-founder and the algorithm's primary inventor. The alternative, Volta publicly discloses IP contamination concerns, tanking the Series B and potentially suing for rescission plus damages. That would bankrupt the company and destroy Elena's reputation permanently. The managing partner made one phone call to Elena, told her she had 48 hours to agree to amended company documents or Volta would begin unwinding the investment. Elena tried to negotiate, tried to claim misunderstanding, tried to position me as a disgruntled contractor making false claims. But Volta had the evidence. They'd seen the internal email. They'd verified the timeline. They owned her board seats and her reputation. 2 days later, I received amended company documents, listed as co-founder and chief algorithm officer with 8% fully vested equity post-Series A. Patents amended to include me as primary inventor. Company website and all press materials revised to accurately describe my role. Elena had to sign everything. She had no choice. But I added one more clause, and this one was personal. If Elena ever attempts to reduce my role, undermine my equity, or force me out through hostile means, my equity immediately accelerates and I receive a board observer seat, a poison pill against future betrayal. She signed, watched her signature on the document that forced her to share credit for work she'd tried to steal. I didn't say anything, didn't gloat, just took the executed paperwork and walked out. That was 18 months ago. The Series B closed last quarter at $75 million. My equity is worth approximately $24 million on paper. More importantly, my reputation is rebuilt. Industry publications correctly cite me as the algorithm's inventor. I speak at conferences, advise other startups, have independent leverage. Elena still runs the company as CEO. We maintain professional distance. But every board meeting, every press release, every valuation increase reminds her that she couldn't erase me. My name is permanently attached to the technology she tried to steal. The real revenge isn't that I destroyed her company. It's that I forced her to share the success. Every time she presents to investors or speaks at conferences and has to introduce me as co-founder, she's reminded that her perfect theft failed. I also helped Sarah land a role at a competing battery analytics startup, connected the mechanical engineer from Elena's previous scheme with David Park. That case is ongoing, and now there's a documented pattern. These days, I advise young technical founders on protection strategies, built an open-source IP protection toolkit, because the lesson isn't that business people are predators. Most aren't. The lesson is that charisma and competence can mask intention, and trust without verification is just negligence wearing a friendly mask. Here's what I learned, and what might save you from the same trap. Never sign anything involving intellectual property or equity without independent legal review. Not their lawyer, not a lawyer they recommend. Your lawyer, representing only your interests. Yes, it costs $1,500 to $3,000 up front. It's still cheaper than the legal hell of untangling predatory agreements later.
Many bar associations offer limited scope review services if you can't afford full representation.
Document your creation and invention process obsessively. Version control systems like GitHub automatically timestamp every commit. Email yourself milestones and methodology notes. Keep dated technical drawings, lab notebooks, development journals. If you're creating something valuable, you need forensic proof you created it first. This evidence is what saved me. Without those time-stamped repos, I had nothing. Understand that consulting agreements and equity promises are completely different legal instruments. A verbal promise of founder's equity means nothing if it's not in writing. Don't sign work-for-hire or consulting agreements that transfer IP ownership without simultaneous equity documentation. If someone says the equity will be formalized later, that later needs to be a specific date with consequences if it doesn't happen. Research your mentors and partners. LinkedIn isn't just for networking, it's for due diligence. Do they have patterns of partnerships that ended badly? Can you contact their previous co-founders? What happened to people who worked with them before? I didn't do this basic research on Elena. If I had, I would have found the hardware engineer. Provisional patents versus final patents matter enormously. Being named on a provisional application doesn't guarantee you'll appear on the final utility patent. That's when ownership truly vests. Ask to review final patent applications before they're filed, and if your name gets removed, that's securities fraud if the company misrepresents IP ownership to investors. Code and algorithm provenance is forensically provable. Commit history, original documentation, and development timeline create evidence that's difficult to dispute. But you have to create and preserve that evidence. Every technical founder should maintain personal repositories of their work with clear timestamps.
Investors care about IP integrity because it affects their returns. That's leverage if you can prove contamination. They're not your enemy in these situations. They're rational actors protecting their investment. Going to them with evidence, not emotion, changes the power dynamic completely. Non-compete agreements signed under fraudulent pretenses are often unenforceable, but you need legal help to challenge them. Don't let the threat of a non-compete paralyze you. If you can prove you were defrauded into signing, many jurisdictions will invalidate the restriction. The best revenge in business isn't destruction. It's forced accountability. I didn't destroy Elena's company. I made her share the success she tried to steal. That's more satisfying and more profitable than burning everything down. Finally, documentation isn't paranoia. It's professionalism. Keep records of every significant communication, decision, and contribution. The internal email Sarah preserved where Elena explicitly ordered documentation rewriting, that single piece of evidence was more valuable than any testimony or argument. Assume that anything important will be disputed later and create proof accordingly. I'm not saying distrust everyone or approach business relationships with cynicism. I'm saying protect yourself professionally so you can trust people personally. Proper structure prevents misunderstandings and removes ambiguity. Good people don't resist that clarity. They welcome it. Looking back, I'm almost grateful Elena showed her true nature when she did. The company was still small enough that investors could pressure her into resolution. If she'd waited another year after a Series C at $1 billion valuation, I'd have had no leverage. Her impatience saved me. My company now generates real revenue from those Ford and GM contracts Elena pitched. The algorithm works at scale. I'm building a team of my own, advising technical founders, and contributing to open-source projects that help others avoid my mistakes. Elena is still CEO, but she's constrained by the legal framework I forced into place. We'll probably never be in the same room socially again. That's fine. The algorithm I invented at 3 a.m. in my East Austin apartment is now deployed in over 40,000 electric vehicles. It's preventing battery failures, saving manufacturers hundreds of millions, and making transportation safer. My name is on the patents. My equity reflects my contribution. And every time someone asks Elena about the technology's origins, she has to acknowledge me. That's justice. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the slow, methodical process of proving what's true and forcing accountability through documentation and leverage. If this resonated with you, hit that like button. It helps other people find these stories when they need them most. And if someone offered to handle the business side while you focused on building something revolutionary, what's the one document you'd demand before writing a single line of code? Let me know in the comments.